Imagine an entire nation plunged into darkness for 20 hours a day. Its lifeline suddenly cut and political leaders forced to the table. This is Cuba in 2026. Today, we're diving into the most perilous moment in US-Cuba relations since the Cold War.
When oil stops flowing, everything grinds to a halt. That's the reality Cuba faces right now, and both Washington and Havana are locked in a tense diplomatic dance. I'm here to help unpack what's driving this crisis and what could happen next.
We'll break down how the U.S. oil blockade triggered this flashpoint, why Venezuela's sudden shift is so pivotal, and how backroom diplomacy may shape Cuba's fate.
Plus, we'll spotlight the humanitarian impact, the political high-wire act in D.C., and the scenarios that could define the region's future. Buckle up for a revealing journey into the heart of the 2026 Cuban crisis.
Let's start with the oil blockade. In January 2026, the U.S. slapped tariffs on any country supplying oil to Cuba, basically shutting down their energy grid overnight.
And it's not just about cars and power plants. Hospitals, food distribution, even water treatment, everything depends on fuel. And now, most of it's gone. The result? Blackouts that last most of the day and a population pushed to the brink.
It's the worst crisis since the special period in the 90s. But this time it's compounded by a global spotlight and political maneuvering. The U.S. strategy seems designed to apply maximum pressure as quickly as possible.
What's wild is how fast it unraveled. As soon as the blockade took hold, Cuba's leaders had almost no choice but to come to the negotiating table, even as they publicly denounced the move as illegal.
Venezuela used to be Cuba's lifeline, sending tens of thousands of barrels of oil a day in exchange for doctors and advisors. But then, the U.S. swooped in, toppled Maduro, and rerouted the oil.
That's right after the U.S. intervention in Venezuela. Not only did the shipments stop, but Cuban support teams were forced out. With U.S. forces controlling the oil, Havana lost its biggest bargaining chip practically overnight.
And the U.S. didn't waste time. They let a trickle of oil reach Cuba's private sector for humanitarian needs, but nothing for the government or military.
This pivot turned Venezuela from Cuba's best friend into a U.S.-controlled pressure valve. It's a huge reversal, and it's why Cuba suddenly looks so isolated.
Cuba's president, Diaz-Canel, has gone public about the talks with the U.S., but each side's playing hardball. Washington wants regime change, or at least a friendly takeover, while Havana is desperate for economic relief but refuses to concede political control.
You can see how tense it is. Cuba already released dozens of political prisoners as a goodwill gesture, but they're drawing a line at any hint of forced political reforms. The U.S., meanwhile, is holding all the cards, especially with Trump's team talking openly about tightening the screws.
And then incidents like the deadly speedboat interception flare up, reminding everyone how quickly things could spiral out of control.
It's a delicate balance, too much pressure, and you risk a humanitarian collapse or mass migration. Too little and nothing changes. That's the tightrope both sides are walking right now.
That actually brings us to the real human toll. These policy moves aren't just headlines, they mean 2 zero-hour blackouts, empty pharmacies, and food lines that stretch for blocks.
People are desperate. Emigration is at historic highs. Over 1 million have left since 2021. Vulnerable groups like children and the elderly are suffering most, and every new policy twist hits them hardest.
It's a harsh irony. Both sides claim to act in the people's interest, yet ordinary Cubans are paying the steepest price. The UN is warning of humanitarian collapse if something doesn't give soon.
And it's not just Cuba. If the crisis keeps escalating, we could see waves of migrants, strained borders, and ripple effects across the whole hemisphere.
So where does this go next? There's talk of an economic pact partial sanctions relief in return for more prisoner releases and economic opening. That might stabilize things in the short term.
Though if talks collapse, we could be looking at regime breakdown, mass protests, or even more drastic U.S. moves. Some in Congress are pushing for outright embargo repeal, but there's stiff resistance.
If the U.S. keeps control over Venezuelan oil and ramps up pressure, Havana could try appealing to Russia or China for help. But that's a logistical nightmare with the blockade in place.
And let's not forget the domino effect. What happens in Cuba could influence U.S. strategies in places like Nicaragua or Bolivia, reshaping the regional order for years to come.
If there's one thing that's clear, it's how the U.S. oil blockade, especially after Venezuela's reversal, has put Cuba at a crossroads. First takeaway: energy leverage can shift power fast.
Second, real people are caught in the crossfire. Every policy move reverberates in homes, hospitals, and border towns across the region.
Third, the window for diplomacy is narrow and risky. Each side is watching for signs: the next prisoner release, a tweak in oil policy, or a change in rhetoric.
If you want to stay ahead of this fast-moving crisis, watch fuel shipments, migration flows, and official statements from both Havana and Washington. Those early indicators could tell us which way the dominoes will fall.